All right. Welcome again to Fearless Presence, everybody. If you've listened before, you can tell that my voice is not its normal self at the moment. Uh, but thank you for listening. I have a super exciting guest today, and I did not want to delay getting this out. Stephanie Drury is a Seattle based writer and social commentator, renowned for her incisive critique of American evangelical culture. Through her platform, Stuff Christian Culture Likes, she offers a satirical yet insightful examination of the nuances within Christian communities. Her Instagram account, at Stuff Christian Culture Likes, is a visual extension of her commentary, sharing memes, personal reflections, and community interactions that resonate with a broad audience. Stephanie's unique blend of humor and critical analysis has established her as a prominent voice in discussions about contemporary Christian culture. I have been following Stephanie on social media for probably at least a decade, and I'm so excited to have you here today, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't believe you've been following me that long.
It's been a long time for sure.
Yeah, back in the Twitter
Um,
days.
Back in the Twitter, yeah, for sure. And certainly pre-Instagram or
Yeah,
before I was on Instagram. Anyway,
for that was a learning curve, but yeah, now that's just where everything is. So,
it is, yeah. So I would love for you to talk about religious trauma and sort of the evolution of it or the lack of evolution of it, because
mhm.
when I reached out to you, I mean, one of the things that has clicked for me and my own trauma expertise, and in working with the body, and particularly how uh people with suicide ideation, and I'm a physical therapist, so like that's not usually like who physical therapists end up seeing, but I've just recognized how the body is informing the brain to create different behaviors. And but I can really weave a religious trauma thread through my most memorable patients
Mm.
over the years. And certainly that's a part of my own story too, where my voice got squashed and I had to be in choir but was not allowed to sing. And so just
Are
had to
you
mouth the
serious?
word. Yeah, and just had to mouth the words for years,
Literally?
literally.
Whoa. Okay, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt, but
And
wow.
that's okay. And the and I didn't grow up Catholic, um, but people keep inviting me to help lead their Mary Magdalene retreats. And I can't, like, this whole Mary Magdalene keeps finding me.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, her story is certainly one that was traumatized, or she was or the narrative around her um was
Maligned for
traumatized,
centuries
totally
too.
maligned for centuries. And so there's I have probably so this whole um but anyway, in like kind of connecting all of these dots for myself, I realized that there's nobody out there helping people with religious trauma in an organized way, or really training professionals on what to do with it, because I believe that compared to other types of trauma, it's different, and you can't use even really great evidence somatic based practices will, like, they can be incredibly helpful, and I don't want to minimize that, but I think that they're incomplete. But I would love to hear kind
Absolutely.
of where you, um, kind of where, I guess, where you ended up on this thread of things and how you've seen it evolve.
Yes, well, I was about 30 when, things kind of hit the fan for me emotionally. I had just had my 2nd baby. Um, my husband and I both moved away from our families who are, our dads are both Baptist preachers, and, we kinda didn't mean to try to escape from our families, but we moved to a totally different part of the country and started on our own. And looking back, it's like, okay, there was something starting there. Uh, and when the family dynamics started rearing to where I could finally see they're really trying to control me. And they're really mad that I'm far away. I'm started my own family now. Am self-sufficient. What's going on here? And it forced me into therapy for the very first time. And I was really fortunate to get someone who was familiar with spiritual abuse dynamics. My therapist had gone to the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology. I don't know how familiar you are with that. Dan Allender started it. He has a lot of his most famous books are like The Wounded Healer and Leading with a Limp.
Mm.
But he's a sexual trauma therapist. Well, he's special. I think that's his specialty though. And he's a believer. He's a professing Christian, practicing Christian, but he is very aware of the dynamics of spiritual abuse. So I got a therapist who had studied directly under him. And I'm very grateful for that because she was able to help me not completely throw the baby out with the bathwater. Although I came really close. I mean, I did for a little while, just as far as the natural response to realizing the harm from people who claim faith in Jesus Christ. Your natural response is to be like, this Christianity thing is harmful, and I don't want anything else to do with it. That never stayed for me. That didn't stick for me. It didn't resonate with me. I had a stronger sense that what's wrong is what these people are doing with this belief system. So I was able to not, as we were talking about, throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I would rather have a very clean baby instead.
That is my
And that
favorite my
really,
new favorite expression. Yeah. She needs a
it
really
just,
clean baby.
it feels more hopeful and it feels truer
Mm.
because I remember my therapist saying to me, I mean, along with her saying the clinical stuff about these are the controlling behaviors that are being acted upon you, have always been acted upon you. You needed to fall in line with this system, family system. This is how family systems work. And when you throw religion in there, that's a whole nother meta level of a way to control you. And this is what it looks like when you go against that, that control. None of this is your fault. Your anger is righteous and beautiful. She was telling me all the stuff I really needed to hear. That was all completely true. And at the same time, she said to me, are you able to carve out a space for yourself where you can say, or just play around with the idea that God could be real and God could be good? And that was something else that was pretty key in my being able
Mm.
to see overall that the people that I knew who had completely left the faith, there was something about it where they still seemed really, really mad. And I don't like to use the word bitter because it's been so maligned. Like it's not the same thing as anger. But there's kind of a thing where it just shows, it looks like, oh, if you're bitter, just there's something you haven't really worked through. So I think that it's almost too easy to completely turn your back on the idea of faith and the religion. Like if it doesn't work for you, doesn't resonate for you, that's good, but make sure you get to that spot before writing it completely off. And if you don't, I think that's going to deter your complete healing.
Well, there's certainly, I mean, spiritual belief systems have existed for as long as we have recorded history. And so there's clearly something really fundamental about it. Like it's something that drives us to have a relationship with something bigger than ourselves. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
fabric of community, all that we need community. So
oh,
I think that's
yeah,
what it draws on in a really large way. Yeah, that
totally. Yeah, no, because we will do anything to be part of the herd,
right. Yeah.
even if we have to sacrifice our own essence to
Yes. Yes.
belong.
And I mean, an unhealthy family dynamic will encourage you to sacrifice that essence of yourself. And just
Absolutely.
so many people live that way just because it's easier. It's
Yeah, well, it's like, I
daring
mean,
and difficult to stand up to that.
yeah,
There's a
well,
big
I mean,
price to pay.
absolutely, and we're so, uh, the science of it all says that we're wired for what's familiar, not what's right for us.
Yeah. Yes, that's why those neural pathways are so hard to reconfigure.
Yeah, and yeah, and I don't know why, like, some of us turn out to be more of the family disruptor than others in the way that happens, or what it is that, like, you aren't in the, um that something happens that you're because those, like, the more fundamental a belief system is, the more fundamentalist it is, and rigid, the more we tend to be in our fear pathways.
Yeah, yeah.
But then something about, somewhere along the line, somebody gets tired of being afraid, or they see where they can love, like they can access more parts of their brain than maybe somebody else could, or they see something else is true and they don't have to be so addicted um to being right
Mhm.
about whatever
Yeah.
that system is. I also think in my own way that I uh look at ancient spiritual systems, like ancient mythology and the particularly the Vedas, but this works through astrology and it even works with stories in the Bible. Though I think the Bible's been more edited uh, over time than some of those other texts. That these were stories of our like one fundamentally they were stories of the Earth's precessional cycle, the stories of how the stars moved, and stories of our anatomy and physiology. And you can't tell me the ancient Egyptians didn't know enough anatomy with all their mummification to have good mythology around that. And but we are we all have so much light pollution now, and our anatomy literally mimics the stars. When I think about being made in the image of God, like we are literally made in the image of the stars, like in the most like in
Stardust.
the most scientific way and in the most
Mhm.
geometric way. Like I kind of like I call it our like fundamental science hidden in plain sight. And yeah, our bones come from stardust of stars that exploded billions of years ago, and like there's so many cool scientific facts around all of that. And I think that we just don't have enough dark skies to really anymore to see that in the way that people did thousands of years ago. But clearly this authoritarian pattern is not a new pattern historically either, and we're seeing not only we're seeing this intersection now, or this merging of authoritarian religion with authoritarian government.
Yeah. I mean, it's everything's cyclical. This has happened up and down through yeah, yeah. It's just gonna come back around and then people something really bad will happen as a result. People learn their lesson for a few years and then then back to it.
Right, right. Well, what do you think is the thing that everybody is really trying to get out of it? Is it like peace and purpose, or like what are we trying to I mean, it like being part of the herd for sure, like, but is the um
There's a herd dynamic for sure. There's when I just what's coming to me is the picture of well, I'm thinking of Animal Farm where they had, you know, an authoritarian figure and so many were just happy to prop up that figure and stay out of the way. And there are a couple rebels, and it just feels like that plays out so consistently in so many scenarios and civilizations and families and
Yeah.
churches. So I would say there's something to the wanting to be part of the group, part of the herd, um, that the majority of the people are happy to go along with it and not uh, ruffle any feathers, make any waves. And these systems they depend on those people to just go along and let them.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. What do you think?
Well, I think we both have the desire for like knowing ourselves and being part of the herd. That there's kind of that, like in Jungian psychology, they call it individuation. It's like you want to know, you want to be part of the herd, but you want to know who you are in relationship to that too.
Yeah, that's the healthy way to go.
Yeah. And, but the more we externalize authority, the less we know ourselves.
Yes. And I was talking to someone today, or just messaging with someone who said that he was really confused about who to vote for, because he didn't want to support genocide, but he also didn't want his third party vote to help elect Trump. And he said, it's really hard for me to know how I feel because I grew up fundamentalist, and the therapist is trying to get me to lean into my emotion, trust my intuition. And I'm like, yeah, see how far reaching it is.
Yeah, no, we're so disconnected from the language of our bodies. And I think this is something that's
Mhm.
really going to shift in coming years because with all the artificial intelligence, we're not going to know what's real and what's fake very soon. And we're going to have some kind of somatic practice, like to have to connect with our
Mhm.
real intelligence, with our internal compass to start to figure that out for ourselves because it's not going to be discernible.
I can see it coming. It's like a Black Mirror episode. We're not going to be able to know where we begin and the phone ends.
Yeah. So, like, what's a typical, some people clearly have religious trauma because they were explicitly, specifically abused within the system in a way that uh, might not even be unique to that system. Like if you were molested or, for example, within the church, but that's, like there's that very specific kind of abuse. And then there's the sort of the more long-term emotional abuse that takes a little while to figure out, oh my gosh, this is not right. Like
Mhm,
this is really
mhm.
messed up. And um, I'm curious how you, like in the people, in your followers and the people you uh, work with, do they, um, I don't know, I'm just curious, what are some of the similarities and differences maybe between like in the struggles within those two different life experiences?
Speaking for myself personally, I was able to see what was going on around me pretty clearly because it was overt. It was like, um, my family didn't hold back in how they felt, kind of thing.
Mm,
Uh, and I was drawn to my friends who had peaceful families, and no one raised their voice, and people were there's a lot of laughing, but even though it seemed a little forced, I'm like, this is better than a bunch of yelling, or not
yeah,
knowing when someone's going to yell. But then I've started to realize in recent years, like, oh, these just seeing how things have unraveled in these families I've known for a long time. It's like, oh, they are just as toxic. And by that, I mean, that's such an overused word. I guess unhealthy, dysfunctional, but in a more, what's the word, like insidious way, because it's so underground. It's really hard to see. And that has, I mean, it took me a while to see. And my friends in these families are still, we're near pushing 50, all of us going, it's really hard for me to see the dysfunction in my family because they never yell and like nothing really happened. And I'm like, okay, I've been reading up on neglect, and it's even more harmful than overt abuse because it's harder to name, because nothing happened. It's so much harder to point at it and see what is actually happening.
Mm. And it's like from a religious trauma perspective, like how does neglect play out that you got like
Well, I would say the ways that I've seen it, most clearly recently have been in ways in which any emotion that isn't happy has been dismissed. You know,
mm,
I've had to spend time in families that are deeply Christian, evangelical. They're so nice, right? They're so nice. But if they say, "How was your day? Did you have a good day?" Like there's only one answer. There's no sadness, that's never been brought. No one's mad, that's never discussed. And if someone's sad, the question is, are you even a Christian? Like this came out, like this one family that I've had my eye on, I'm like, something's not right. It came out recently that when this one person in this family was sad, they were asked, "Are you even a Christian?" I'm like, there you go. That's what that looks
wow.
like. Yeah.
Wow. That is shedding some new light just for my own lived experience for me, because certainly, um, uh, and I have a lot of compassion for the history of my parents and where a lot of ways they parented that I tried not to repeat, like where that came from. But like the conversation that my mother's in her 80s and still largely only conversation we ever have. The only conversation we ever have is I say, I feel fill in the blank. And she says, no, that's not true. Or
Oh,
that's all in your head.
God. I'm sure that's what you got your entire life.
Oh, yeah, no, it's the only
I'm
conversation.
so sorry. Oh,
No, well, and
God.
but I had never considered it through the lens of neglect. So that's giving me a lot of
That's
goosebumps right
There you
now.
go. Well, the
Yeah.
spirit wanted me to tell you that that's what that
Oh,
looks like.
interesting. Yeah.
I'm
The,
sorry.
yeah, no, it's like, we're all, I will say, I actually got, uh, over the summer, I had a couple conversations with my mom where I really had to, I felt like she was sort of picking a political fight with me. And
Mhm.
then, but I really held my ground and said, you don't get to tell me what my felt experience of my life is, and I'm 53 years old. Like, so it's taken a long time to like, be able to really, um, I would say for me not to have like not to get stage fright in front of my mother. Like it just took a long time to unravel that. And but yeah, I almost fell over because the last time I was there, she said, I was en route taking one of my sons back to college. She said, uh, we had another discussion and she said, well, those are your feelings. And I was like, oh, I don't know, like, who are you and what have you done with my mother? that, oh, you're muted, Stephanie. Or somehow you got
Oh,
muted.
don't know how that happened. Yeah, that she acknowledged you had feelings.
She
At
acknowledged I had feelings, like I got hurt.
What
And so,
happened?
like, it was, I didn't even know how to respond
I
to
would
that.
fall over. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
because it was
Wow.
such an unfamiliar, uh, conversation, but it's really but yeah, that um, uh, yeah, I mean, it's for me, the only word around that, like, my experience of, like, that being such a consistent narrative in my life, like, it's just a mind fuck, and then you don't know and you then, like you don't know what's right and what's wrong, or like it makes you feel like you're the insane one when you're probably the most sane, like the only sane one in the asylum.
Exactly. And this tactic uh, allows everyone else to look at you and go, "Oh, look what they're doing. They're getting called insane. I don't want to be called insane. That person's insane. I'm going to side with
Yeah.
the family rather than the person calling out what's going on."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I did not really yeah,
Mhm.
um, framed it that way for myself, and certainly there's a lot of, um, I don't know that this happens in the religious world, but and it probably explicitly does not. But there's, the term spiritual bypassing is out there, which is kind of how you might describe a lot of, like, oh, I'm not going to have a bad feeling, or it needs to just be positive or whatever. But it's really somatic bypassing. Like you are bypassing your body, you're bypassing your internal authority.
Somatic bypassing. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not spiritual bypassing, it's somatic
Yeah.
bypassing.
Yeah. Yeah. Intuitive bypassing. Wow.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so good.
Because your inner, you can't relate your inner authority then to what's happening outside of yourself, or like, and I think that
Mhm,
that's,
mhm.
the relationship of what's happening inside of us and what's happening outside of us is the source of all of our stress and conflict and
Mhm, mhm.
trauma and drama and
Oh, yeah,
everything.
not being able to have a center is the source of all. Well, I'm saying this as someone who does not have any kind of psychology degree, but I've read this, across several different types of platforms, books, writer or authors, and they say that the seat of mental illness is not being able to affirm your own feelings. It's not being able
Mm.
to affirm what you know to be true for yourself. And I'm thinking of, I mean, this was a tragedy. Someone that I knew committed suicide over 10 years ago. And come to find out, he was bipolar. And his wife told me that she always noticed that his mom invalidated his feelings and did it to all of his siblings as well. And that just always stayed with me. This was before I was really on my journey with all this, but that really made me think, like, if you can cause someone not to trust themselves, that's the best way to
Mm.
pull the bricks out from the bottom, like, just
I
demolish their foundation.
Yeah. No, I could affirm that through my own story and client stories as well. Um, and the research on s how incredibly protective spirituality, but not real, like, in the research, they've been able to separate out spirituality as, like, your relationship with your inner authority, or like what your relationship with something bigger than yourself, but like with your personal devotion is what they call it, versus personal conservatism is what they call, is one word for like uh religion, like the external authority, or the sometimes it's called religiosity is another word in the research around that. And but your um personal devotion, as as AKA spirituality, is massively protective for mental health. And there's some evidence that it's also massively pr protective for longevity, or it's part of what helps you live longer. And, like, no medicine, no intervention comes even close to what, um, having your own, having being spiritual or having a spiritual connection with yourself and the world around you. Nothing else comes close to, no other intervention is nearly as potent. And if your mother was spiritual, but not necessarily religious, like, you are super protected. Like, it's really interesting. Like 27% of it is genetic.
I believe that. I believe that.
And and when I look at the nervous system regulation industry, which I've been um, part of, I personally I don't like at all the term nervous system regulation, because I think regulation for me just evokes, I know that they're trying to like control the flow of the valve kind of thing is the way that they mean it, but the word regulation just doesn't sit with my inner rebel very well.
Yeah.
And but as church attendance has plummeted, nervous system regulation as an industry has risen. And church was one place where we used to get a lot of nervous system regulation exercises,
Absolutely.
through singing or like,
Liturgy.
prayers, and then, would be one, even like looking at your hymnal and then looking up at the altar, like looking near and far is really regulating to the nervous system. And we don't get that anymore. So we're always trying, I think I'm always amused at how we're always trying to solve our own problem.
Wow.
We
Wow.
just are very creative about how we do that.
That reminds me of the notion that we've all been harmed through relationship, and we will be healed through relationship. Like, we're
Well, I
trying to
think
heal ourselves, but does it need to be a community exercise? Is that something we need?
I think that it happens. I think in community, it happens better, faster, and lasts longer, for sure. And I love doing group healing demonstrations because I can like go through and teach everybody how to test their own bodies or go through and do some biomechanical assessments myself. And then I will just use my own somatic guidance to choose somebody out of the group, treat that person, and then reevaluate everybody else without even treating them. And the whole group is shifted. Like, their own restrictions have resolved, even though I have not touched them,
Wow.
because we are so incredibly connected. And I think our HIPAA laws are killing us.
In what way? The privacy?
The privacy, yeah, that where it's like you're doing it alone in secret versus doing it in
Oh,
community.
wow. Yeah, yeah. Wow. Someone told me recently that she wanted to stop drinking, but she lived in such a small town that she just wasn't comfortable going to a meeting. And I was just like, "Oh god, that really sucks." I totally understand. And it's like, something tells me that you need that community, and if you don't feel safe in the community, she didn't feel safe, like, job-wise. Like, her job was something that it would have been, yeah,
Yeah,
risky for her. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
anyway, I don't know what the
Well, and it
solution
is
is.
easier to be I think it's much easier for us to reveal ourselves to strangers than it is to
Hmm.
the people we're closest to.
Oh, that's a good point.
Often, like, it's easier to be, because you don't there's not a relationship there to create judgment in the first place, or there's nothing
Yeah.
there to be afraid of.
There's nothing to lose.
There's
You're just
nothing to
gonna tell
lose,
your
right.
story, and then you're gonna leave.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I
Before the pandemic, I was going to Al-Anon meetings, with a friend who she had a husband in recovery, and I was like, "I just wanna sit in on this." I don't have any active alcoholics in my life, but I started to realize that my family treats religion like a substance, and it was really helpful for me
Oh,
to view it in that way.
that is so good. That is
Yeah.
really powerful.
I wanna write a book on it. I just I need time. I need the time to sit down
Yeah.
and write.
Now, well, I really from some of my business coach training, uh, that was very nervous system based. There was a lot of around the addiction to being right,
Oh god.
but like in a
That's what
corporate, because yeah, because
yeah.
we've all worked for somebody that has been addicted to being right, but that's what real or dogmatic religion or
Yeah.
fundamentalist religion is the same thing. That's an addiction to being right.
And it's a way to control your own how you feel and control everyone around you, just like what alcohol or any substance would do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Wow.
It allows you to not have to feel your vulnerable feelings. That would make you ask, "Am I even a Christian if I'm sad?"
Oh, that's so incredibly uh I will say, like, well, the first thing I think when I hear that, because one thing, like, I'll have to ask my kids if they ever remember me saying that, but they would, like, I can remember telling them many times, like, it's okay to be angry, it's just not okay to, like,
Break things.
break things or whatever, right? That it's, yeah, that you can't, or you can't, like, you don't need to have, like, yeah, like that. But I always told them it was okay to have, like, you can feel this. You just, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, you can't take anyone else down with you.
I'm wonder what I said to my kids. I remember I said something like that, and now I'm wondering if I said the right thing to them.
Right. Well, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I think they're, it's just sometimes like you don't always uh
My
I don't
posture
know.
has definitely changed over the years with them, and they've gotten to see me evolve,
Yeah.
which is probably the best thing that could have happened because I got into therapy when they were really little, got to break that cycle really early on,
Yeah.
and I'm so grateful for
Yeah. Now
that.
mine were pretty little when I went started in therapy too. And I do think that like being able to be a vulnerable parent versus or like in the research they call it an authoritative parent versus an authoritarian parent. But
Mhm.
being able to like, to tell them to like this is like I was able to tell my sons, I was like, "I'm sorry, I recognize I'm," like, I was able to stop myself and be like, "I know I'm being hard on you.
Yeah,
It's not fair. This is a
yeah.
pattern that I'm really trying to
Oh, that's so good that
undo,
you're able to say that.
and we're gonna work on this," like, rather than, like, you
Yeah.
know you know, uh, being so, um, my way or the highway about it.
Mhm.
Um, but, yeah, I think it's funny, like, we don't realize, sometimes we don't remember those sort of what got seeded, and I think as long as, like, your intention was, like, that you were trying, like, that you were working for evolution of something, or, like,
Mhm.
I think that sort of matters more than a lot of things. My mom reminded me last summer, my dad was in the hospital, and she and I were just we are oil and water on the best of days, and the, um but she reminded me of something that like I have a very hermit kind of personality. I like a lot of alone time, a lot of downtime. I was the kid that would like read a bunch of books in a room by herself
Same.
and 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 my mom said to me last summer, she's like, "Well, you never did want to be part of this family." And I went, "Oh, I totally forgot that she used to say that to me."
Well, and you know what that automatically makes me think is what kind of environment was your family creating that would make you not want to be a part of it?
Right. Well,
If you were brilliantly withdrawing, you were taking care of yourself. You were going within, you were occupying yourself, you were creating your own little worlds in books and whatever writing, creative stuff you were doing. That is just another blame shifting thing, and I don't like that.
yeah, right. I mean, it was like we're all, but it was really, but I had totally forgotten that she had said that, but a child doesn't hear
Mhm,
that. A
mhm.
child hears, "You're not welcome in this family,"
Oh,
or
yeah.
"You don't
That's
belong in this family."
yeah, kids don't withdraw like that. No, like, kids are wired, all of us are wired to hunt for that connection, and if it's
Yeah,
just not there, then we'll go retreat in books.
yeah, interesting. But yeah, so I think when you plant those seeds, and I think that you have, like, for all of us, because we've all got our traumas and dramas, and and I feel like I mean, for me, like, I have a lot of compassion for where they came from. I could tell this, like, in the way that I see my life as a story, I could see how, like, I've casted these characters, like, there was some amount of
Mhm.
soul level choice in
Oh,
in this,
yeah.
like, so I don't feel the victim in any way, shape, or form with this. But I think that, like, I love in the way that we're so polarized right now,
Mhm.
that um, whether that's religious or non-religious or Democrat or Republican, um, you know, uh, male, female, binary, non-binary, or whatever, like, however, that plays out in so many, like, just all over the place. We see this. And I think that there's a little bit of a rule of the universe to that. Like, we have a North Pole and a South Pole, and that there's just, um, but when, I think Carl Jung's, uh, tension of the opposites, so when you can hold two opposing truths to be simultaneously, when you can hold two opposing things to be simultaneously true, then a third thing can be born that couldn't previously
Mhm.
exist. And that's so Holy Trinity in its,
Yes, that's it feels like birth is given there, and,
yeah, it's
but then the
resurrection.
number 3 is holy because for that
Yeah,
reason, yeah.
right. And we live on the third planet from the sun, and we have all of these polarities. But the third thing is the field. It's the electromagnetic field that you said. It's the electromagnetic field of our hearts, like how our, which for, like, in relationship is how we neurologically connect with each other, how we regulate with each other.
Mhm.
And, like, we're so busy looking at the two things, but not for the third thing.
That's exactly it, I posted stuff on Stuff Christian Culture Likes in the past week pertaining to the election, pertaining to, the controversial topic of the genocide, and how you must vote third party to express your non-support of the genocide. But then I'm trying to say, look where this leaves us. Here's the testament of a Palestinian woman who
Mhm.
said, "I beg you, please vote for Kamala. This will be the best choice for my family who is still in Palestine." And she's lost a lot. You know what I mean? And
Wow.
people are not able to hear it. And I'm like, listen, I know y'all grew up in fundamentalism. It's hard for you to hear an outside party, but it's so interesting how binary people are approaching it. And I remember being younger and not being able to see a third way. Just black and white, very much this is right, this is wrong, and all or nothing. And I had no possibility for anything in the middle. I felt like my integrity was completely destroyed if I would throw any inkling of support behind something that wasn't 100% on. So it feels like there is something as I've gotten older. This feels like a radical acceptance of things aren't perfect, and I need to face that and do the best I can with what's right in front of me and the people
Yeah.
around me. And that feels like the birthing of a new possibility where before it just felt very bleak to not have a third option.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a couple thoughts about that. Like, I mean, what's playing out in the Middle East is something that has played out for all of time.
Right.
Like, it's not, and that doesn't make it right, but it's just, But in the way that, like, I personally think that, like, um, being pro life is not honoring God, it's playing God with
Wow.
people's lives. I think that it's also maybe similarly arrogant to think that we didn't come here to be destroyers, that that war isn't somehow divinely orchestrated, even in all of the absolute terribleness of all of it, that we all wish was not there. And when I teach the neuroscience of storytelling, I teach that contrast is the language of the nervous system, because neurons fire or they don't. There's not really an in between thing. And you would not go see a movie or read a book or watch a TV show and rave about it to your friends if there was not enough contrast in it, because it would be boring. And our nervous systems will not let us live a dull story. Like, you
Mm.
might not know how to tell it in the most interesting way, but nobody lives a dull story. And that we are here for the contrast.
That's so true. Do you remember in the 80s when I can't remember if it was the Today Show, but someone would throw a dart at a map and go find someone in that town, and just the first person they found, they'd get their life story, and it was always awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
No,
impossible to live a
absolutely.
dull story,
It's
yeah.
impossible to live a dull story, and and I think it's, again, kind of like playing God, not honoring God or the universe, to think that everybody's here to live to be 100 years old,
Wow.
or that, that there's not, like, and honestly, I think like some of the intersection of, like, so the earth tilts on, or shifts 1 degree on the ecliptic every 72 years. And, like, the average life expectancy globally is almost exactly 72 years.
Whoa.
Like, and I don't know that those things could ever be, like, science math statistically connected, but, like, when I in my own little, like, um, like, I think, like, to me, that's, like, there's some kind of balance that has to be kept to keep the earth on its axis, and that's part of what life and death is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's hard to communicate with everyone when I come from the perspective that, uh, we may have chosen this incarnation, each of us. It just, uh, yeah, I don't know. Do you find it a struggle to communicate with
Yeah, it
people
is.
coming from mhm.
No, I think it's hard to wrap your head around until it, like, smacks you in the face that, like, "Oh, this is," um, or "this is what's playing out in my life," at l at least, like, so in the way that I was not allowed to sing in choir, and then didn't feel like I thought I was gonna get in trouble if I told my parents that I was mouthing the words. So, like, so I just, it didn't, I just let myself get humiliated in front of my
Mm,
peers, and, you know, didn't
Melanie,
say
I'm so
anything to anyone.
sorry.
It's okay.
God.
Well, so, and here I am today with no voice talking about, I spent my life specializing as a physical therapist, specializing in treating the vagus nerve as a pinched nerve in the body, and your vagus nerve innervates your vocal cords.
Mm.
So I
Mhm,
always
mhm.
knew that, like, I was like, I was, as that evolved, like, somewhere in my 30s, I was like, "Oh, I get it. This is what I'm doing." And but then when my life was upside down and I couldn't figure it out, I went and, got into astrology because nothing else made sense of what was happening in my life, and the astrology really made a lot sense of a lot of the not what I thought was nonsense. And I did a, Marguerite Manning is an astrologer. She's got a 12th house workbook, which it's like $18, and it's the best $18 you will ever spend. And I don't have an affiliate
Writing
link
this
or anything,
down.
like, go. But it's but it's like unlocking your karmic backstory. And in my astrology chart, my karmic backstory is lost voice. And I was like, oh, I enrolled everybody in this. Like, this story is so much bigger than myself.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting that you were like a bookworm as a child. And I wonder if your role in the family system is the lost child. Because my husband, that was his role. He was quiet. He was in his room all the time, reading, writing music. And the family kind of lore is that, oh, he just likes to be by himself. He doesn't really like to be around a bunch of people. But it's just also downright scientific with how these patterns display across every single family. There's the golden child, there's the scapegoat, there's the lost child, there's the like cheerleader. Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple more, I
Interesting.
think, but
Yeah.
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 It's
No, I could see
like you
that.
were
And
saying, it's so funny how these things seem like scientifically precise.
yeah.
It's just crazy.
Well, and then beyond that, I was named after Melanie in Gone with the Wind because she was so
Oh,
nice.
because she was so sweet and demure and
Yeah. And also very
forgiving.
comfortable in Scarlet Shadow.
She didn't mind being overshadowed by Scarlet. Oh my God.
Yeah. And my mother is totally Scarlett O'Hara.
Wow. So she
And
wanted a Melanie who would just kind of be her quiet cheerleader, maybe.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think she knew what she was getting into when she did
I'm
that.
not
But like,
trying to
I've
shit
got,
talk your mom. I'm sorry. I
yeah,
hope
no,
I'm
no.
not
I mean,
being too impolite.
my mom is very much the Kool-Aid mom. She's super sweet, but we've all got our like, but like when you put our astrology charts together, it says, oh, she just considers it her job to disrupt what I love and value. And like, so she's
All
just
right.
doing her job. Like, I was like, so like, then I was like, I don't take it personally anymore. Like, she's just doing her thing. Like,
That's so beautiful to have that tool, to not be able to take it personally anymore. I need to do the charts of everyone I know, everyone in my family, everyone around me, so I can
yeah.
have that
And so,
information.
right. So it's given me I mean, it's been a tool that's created a lot of self-compassion and a lot of compassion for other people in my life. And in that way, like, that's priceless.
Oh, there's nothing better. There is nothing better than forgiveness. And that's another word I don't like to use because it's been so weaponized in Christian culture, but it's the secret, to,
Yeah.
first of all, you have to forgive yourself before you can forgive anyone else. And we're so cut off from our sense of self, like you were saying earlier. It's hard to know how to even do that. It's hard to know how to connect to our inner child because we were not given a strong sense of being connected to ourselves. You weren't ever taught, well, take care of yourself. Well, what do you really think? What do you need right now? What are you feeling and where? Like, that was not anything modeled. And so it's a struggle for us now to try to even have a concept around that. But once you can connect to yourself and have self-compassion, then you can have it on everyone around you. And
Yeah.
it's such a game changer in every
It
part of your
really
life.
is. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Like, I'm not nearly as hard on myself because I'm like,
Mhm.
and like, and I can recognize, like, I could even tell the story of a recent situation where I was probably, it would not have been hard to label me a bitch in the situation.
Wouldn't have been a
But,
stretch.
I also, well, like, I maintained boundaries. Like, I didn't let somebody who was very narcissistic and manipulative manipulate me, and I'm like, and I've had, it would have been a situation that in the past I might have had some guilt over. Zero guilt.
Nice.
And it's like I
Growth.
have so many, I have so many planets in Aries. Don't ask me 3 times what you want. If I, like if when I offer you something, do you want it? No, what do you want? Well, which choice do you want? Well, it's like, all right, I'm going to take what I want. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
And, if you were a guy doing that, you wouldn't get called a bitch. You wouldn't have been
absolutely.
looked at as being difficult. But
Absolutely.
it's total growth that you were able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, I think again, we're here for the contrast. Like it was just a contrasting experience and I don't have to like allow it to wreck any part of my life. And I
Beautiful.
think it's important to say I'm sorry when it's appropriate to apologize,
Mhm.
but it's just not women apologize, women especially, I think, apologize
Right.
just for existing.
We do
And like
constantly.
even when somebody like out in public, even if somebody's coming out of a door when I'm going in or whatever, and they're like, I'm sorry. I'm like, you do not have to, I will call them out. I'm like, you do not have to apologize for existing. Like you get to
Yes,
take up your space. You don't have to say, I'm sorry that you were coming through a door when I was coming in a public space. Like this is what life is.
I'm trying to stop saying sorry, and I feel rude. But when something happens, like I try to say, "Oh, hi," or "Hey," like something that isn't apologetic for being a normal human taking up valid space walking down the street, right? And I feel like I am seen as a bitch for that. Uh, it's so interesting.
Interesting.
I don't know
Yeah.
what else to
I
do other than sit with it and feel it and be like, yeah, well, this is the
yeah,
price of being a human
yeah,
female in the world.
it is true. I will sometimes say thank you, rather than I'm
Oh,
sorry.
nice. Oh,
Or
that's so good. Yeah. Thank you
or
for
like
waiting.
instead of apologizing for being late, like thank you for waiting for me.
So
Or
good.
thank you for being patient. Like and it's really started for me on the tennis court because what I noticed when I was playing tennis is that the like if a group of men hit a ball onto our court, that they would just take the ball and say thank you. And if a group of women hit a ball on our court, it's like, oh, I'm sorry. And it's like if they're like the barriers between courts aren't high enough to keep balls from flying across. I mean, it happens. It's just part of playing tennis.
Yeah. Wow.
So I just, so I intentionally got in the habit, or that's really where it started for me was like, thank you for returning the ball. Thank you for uh, helping me with my error, with my skill, helping. Thank you for helping me develop my tennis skills.
That's that's
But
the perfect way to go with that. Why do we have to think about this? Why do we even
right,
have to think about it?
I think a couple. I know that our DNA is tagged with the traumas of our ancestors. So, in the research, they can train a male mouse to be afraid of the smell of cherry blossoms, and its grandmice will still be afraid of the smell of cherry blossoms, even though they've never seen a cherry blossom, been exposed to the smell of cherry blossoms. And so, I mean, our fears and our habits, like all those things, are often not even ours.
Yeah,
And I think that's the good and bad. Like it comes through in both ways. Like we research it a lot more around trauma because that's the problem. We don't research the good traits nearly as much.
that's so true.
And then our mitochondria deep in our cells carries 50 generations of memory.
Jeez, that's a lot. That's I don't
And
even wanna
so,
think about how many centuries that is.
yeah. And so we're really, I think a generation is usually about 25 years.
I remember,
And
Larry David talking about his daughter who was too depressed to get up, and he was telling her, "Your grandfathers li or your grandparents lived through the Holocaust, and here you are not being able to get out of bed," and I'm thinking, she's she's bearing the weight of what they weren't able to and what you,
absolutely.
Larry, aren't able to feel. Uh,
Right. No, and there is research very specific to descendants of Holocaust survivors on
oh,
that exact thing.
I bet.
But yeah, well, and I think that's where like religious trauma, or like I'll say where nervous system and healing those kinds of things to me is really where nervous system regulation falls short.
Yeah.
Because when it's not yours, you have to, excuse me, you have to at least, like I teach how to test and treat how other people are living in your nervous system. So they're like, so that you aren't letting other people live in your nervous system rent free. And that could be your great great grandmother that's doing that, or like that genetic memory of that. I mean, I think it more scientifically, objectively shows up like that. But, I think in the realm of things that, like the quantum realm and the realm of things that we can't necessarily explain, that being able to create our own rituals that have meaning. I have a client in her 70s that has, she would be very easily diagnosed with a rotator cuff tear. But she has a history of abuse within her family that involved getting hit on her left shoulder,
On her
like
left
on that
shoulder.
side.
A friend of mine just had surgery on their shoulder, and that's exactly where their dad would grab them.
Yeah.
It's
And so
bursitis and yeah, what you're describing. Wow.
so I asked her if she thought her dad had crossed over or if his spirit was still close. She had a whole family story about how her dad, uh, like right after he died, or after he died, a mourning dove flew into her mom's house, like where they had lived, and like hung out for like 30 minutes. And she, for I don't know how many years, like a long time, has gotten up in her, gets up at her house and there has mourning doves in her yard and says, "Hi, Dad." Like, so she has this whole long story about how her dad is represented as a mourning dove in her life. And she has a very beautiful big garden. We did a little ritual to help Dad cross over, to put the mourning dove into the light. She had no birds in her yard for at least 2 weeks. Like all the birds
Wow.
left. Mourning doves too. They were all gone. And her shoulder pain is dramatically, like it's just like it's not perfect, but it is like so massively better compared to what it was. And it was
Wow.
not like all of the, that's not how any physical therapy clinic would have ever handled
No.
her shoulder pain. But it worked. Like, I mean, she had like maybe 90 degrees of motion. Like she has like almost all full overhead motion
Well,
now.
this is what we need rather than just prescribing more steroids that is just going to exacerbate
Yeah.
whatever the
One,
physiological root of the problem is.
yeah. One, I think when you treat, one of the other things I teach in the neuroscience of storytelling is that when you treat somebody's physical body, sometimes their story changes. But when you
Hmm.
treat somebody's story, their
Mm.
physical body always changes.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think it requires believing in spirits or God or crossing over or anything like that to make that story, to make that exercise meaningful, because that was treating her story.
That's so beautiful because the metaphysical is more real than the physical. What we see and can touch. I mean, first of all, there's an outrageous number of space in an atom. Like, so what is it we're really touching and sensing, right?
Yeah.
So but where did all this come from? It came from a mental or an imaginative or creative force that created it. So that's what's even more real than this is just manifestation, what we can see and what we can
Oh,
perceive
yeah.
with our senses.
Totally. Well, and one of my favorite quotes about our brains is that we're all hallucinating. Reality is just the hallucination we've agreed upon.
That's perfect. That's exactly what it is.
Like that's true neuroscience. That's straight out of a neuroscientist's mouth.
Yeah.
And our nervous systems filter 400 billion pieces of information per second.
Jeez.
So when you think about how many cherries you can pick out of that, like you can pick a lot of different cherries to assemble in different patterns of reality. And that gives me a lot of compassion for people that just see the world vastly differently than I do. That, like
Mhm.
their brains are filtering a different
Yeah,
set of cherries through, or a different set of different trees, different fruits. They're
exactly.
getting
That's
apples
why,
and cherries. It's,
yeah, there's nothing more helpful than having context for the lens that someone sees the world through,
yeah.
because it really gets you on the same page and helps you go, "That could be me, that we're not that different, it's just the lens." That's what I like about the Enneagram, because it helps me see how people view things.
Mm. Yeah.
And I don't know enough about astrology, but I'm so curious to learn more just for that same reason.
Well, when you get a really good astrologer, I mean, I think there's discernment. It's like anything, any industry. Like some people are more skilled, and you're going to resonate with some people more than others. But when you get somebody who's really skilled at uh, conveying that information, I mean, for me, it's just been life altering, and it doesn't. And I think the challenge is, like with astrology, like with anything, is that not to like put, that like I have in like my sun in Aries, that like that's not it's an archetypal energy, which is like a thousand-sided coin, like it's not, it can show up a lot of different ways, and not to let somebody box you in by, oh, this is what like sometimes there's trends, but there's lots of space for it to show up differently. And
Mhm.
you can only get the same astrology chart once every 26,000 years.
Jeez.
So, like, it's like trying to study a fingerprint, and I'm not going to do that. I could really, the research that exists around astrology is very poorly designed for the way astrology to reflect the way astrology actually works. At least as I've dug into it, but it like it helps, like there are some deep truths into who you are. It taps into that, like, oh, this is what that is, or when there's a time that's really challenging, like, oh, this is like, okay, I see what's happening, like I see you Mars, or I see you Pluto, like, all right. And so like, and I think that there's ways to then harmonize that in our own bodies. And the research around, there's amazing research about how the combination of different types of solar and space weather is predictive of cause of death, like heart attack, stroke,
Whoa.
cancer, uh, accident, even accident versus car accident, um, suicide. Like, so like it's wild. Like your nervous system and the solar system are way more in tune than you realize.
I
And
need to know more about this.
that's large
Wow.
population data around that. But when so I want to talk about kind of like remedies that you feel like are really helpful for religious
Hmm.
trauma. And like I have this theory, or my theory is that like if spirituality is the most protective and helpful thing for mental and physical health, then damaging your spirituality is also the most
Yeah.
harmful thing. And because for me, all religions are about your relationship with time or belief system. It's or
Yeah.
it's are you even if you're atheist, it's like, well, okay, you're not eternal,
Yeah.
versus like a Christian that would say that you are, but it's still like your but it's all your relationship with time. And there's a whole, I could go into a whole sciencey conversation around it, but I really think that we don't need nearly as much trauma-informed care as we need time-informed care, and the brain science backs that up. But I feel like the religious, like, it's different than other,
Mm-hmm.
or when it happens within that belief system, because I think because it is connected to the herd, it damages, because then you lose, like losing your herd is so challenging. But I also think that then when healing is, even if you were traumatized outside of church, that when you don't deal with that, how spiritually wounding whatever that was, you don't really get to the next level of healing.
Mm-hmm. The remedy that I've seen, that I have found, just across the board, is love. And I don't believe that therapy is what heals people. I think that love heals people, and I think that lack of love is what damaged people in the first place. Therapy is incredibly useful because it can give you the tools to be able to build receptors for that love. But love has to enter the picture, and that's what's worked for me. And um, it's not something that you can really go out and find. It's almost like a gift, and I begged for that gift. I'm like, I need to know I'm loved. I need to know that I'm meant to be here, that I have any kind of value apart from what I can do or what I can bring to somebody or to the family. And that's why I'm not an atheist, is because when I asked for this, I got it. And uh, really, in some really insane ways that I don't really go around talking about because they sound insane. But I was better. I was healed. Um, and I had a concept of what needed to be done to help heal other people, uh, how to reach out to them, where to point them. And I was reading Byron Katie recently. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah, yeah.
You know that she was in a really bad place until I think it was her late 30s, and she had some sort of spiritual awakening. And she said that it was the man who was in the eating disorder clinic that she was at, who, or she called 911 like to get placed in this clinic, and the man who answered the phone was so compassionate to her on the phone. She goes, I know that's what it was that turned the key for me and like opened me up to this amazing awakening that I had the next day. That resonates for me really deeply.
Well, I think you never know, like, when you're kind to someone or you show up with love, even in the smallest of ways, how much that can ripple through somebody's life. And I love that you asked for love and then you received it. I mean, that's such a fundamental spiritual principle, or fundamental,
Mm,
the Native Americans called it the law of reciprocity, or something, kind of in that context. And it's certainly a principle of manifestation or investment and things like that as well. I think if you are going to suggest to somebody how to, like, what that package of love could look like for someone, is because I think sometimes we don't I think sometimes the love is around us, but we don't see it,
yeah,
or like we
we don't
filter
have
it's.
the nerve endings for it, or just burned
Yeah,
out. It's from trauma a lot of the
yeah.
time.
Well, and it can fundamentally be in in your brain and in your vagus nerve and everything, it can fundamentally be threatening. And I will tell you, I am someone for whom I
Mhm.
fully recognize that joy it's like a death threat to me.
Wow.
And and so I'm way better than I was, but it's like a Taylor Swift concert is a little too much joy. Like I can't,
Interesting.
that feels a little threatening to me. I'm curious about it, but not ready to go.
Does it remind you too much of, like, a fundamentalist church, like a charismatic church service, or what about it feels
Oh,
dangerous?
that's interesting. I think that, um, I think that, that experience in choir shaped my relationship with music for the rest of my life.
Of
Or,
course.
it has, and so I'm very picky about how I consume music. And music fundamentally is I live in New Orleans and I know that part of the reason I'm here is to heal this relationship with music so that it's not so
Mhm.
threatening to my nervous system. And it's gotten way better in the time that I'm here. But I think, those threads run deep uh, from the past, but also the um, I think for me, it's a little bit more about women because I have uh, it took me until my early 40s to think that women were also not threatening in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have a similar story to that. Yeah.
So I think it's like if it was a male artist, maybe I'd be more that had that, maybe I would be more inclined. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. But I think that many women in one place bonding together, just not I support it. I'm happy people like it. I still want to be the kid that's in reading her book in her bedroom while that's going on.
I get it. Yeah. Something formative
So
there for sure.
yeah. The and I think you really do a lot of healing of people through humor and satire on your Instagram page.
Hope so. I mean, that's the only thing you can do is laugh at it. It's so ridiculous.
It is. It's and and laughter is fundamentally disarming.
Yeah, it's disarming and it resets your vagus nerve.
Yep.
It resets your entire mindset. It's
Yep.
it's what saved my life, like, when I was in my very lowest point, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Not quite as potent, but questions can do asking a question does the same thing, but it's that
Mhm.
dismantling that addiction to being right. Let's think about what else is true here,
Yeah. Well, it's like
and
Byron Katie. Byron Katie's all like, "Let's turn that around. Let's take the thought and just ask these questions with this thought that's yeah." I'm just like, "Oh, wow." It's you can do that? That changes everything.
yeah. Um, so tell me what your wild vision for religious trauma healing
Hmm.
is. If you could create something or wave a magic wand or what would that or how would the world or that and how would the world look different if we didn't have that as much of this?
Hmm. There wouldn't be any kind of coercion by religion. Religion wouldn't need to control you, wouldn't need to fill the pews, to keep the lights on, wouldn't need to elect a certain candidate to further their completely biblically unbased views. It's there. If people were healed, then there would be just be so much more of a sense of family. I don't know what that looks like on this broken planet, uh, but just one person at a time, I think, letting them feel heard and that gives them the resource to hear other people. If they can love themselves, listen to themselves, forgive themselves, that can spread out for wherever they are. And you know about this group that I've been hosting at my house, and you coincidentally started hosting one as well, on your own, and we just started talking around the same time we both started these groups. But it's, for people to come together and just send goodwill to distressing situations. So when I posted about it, a lot of people are like, I wish I lived closer so I could come to this. And I'm just, you can start one where you are. That's the whole point. You don't have to
Yeah.
come be a part of this. They're like, oh, I want to, are you doing is it going to be live on Instagram, whatever? I'm like, no, do it yourself if you want to attend.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and I
that's
think it is.
that's my vision.
Yeah. Well, and you can really, like even if you do these groups on Zoom, the the like in a like we can create that connection, that same heart connection
Hmm.
across any space and time where we are. And um yeah, that just like and I think that like the ripple effect of it all, I don't think we get to I don't think we always or get to see that, or maybe not, maybe we get to see it when we die, like what that, but like that true, because I think we're doing our own healing, but when we do that, like we're healing something way bigger than
Hmm.
ourselves. We're healing
Hmm.
our mother lines and our father lines and our communities and our countries and our continents. And, to not minimize the power of just taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Yes. And part of spiritual trauma is to discourage us from thinking that we need to take care of ourselves. So starting at square one would be right there. And I really think the ripple effect is what would heal the world. So that's my wild vision.
Awesome. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today. I could talk with you all day long. I'm going to go
Same.
give my vocal cords a little bit of a rest, but go follow Stephanie on Instagram at Stuff Christian Culture Likes. And she's also on Substack as well. So go check her out. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Melanie.
All right. I'm going to end the recording, but hang on because it takes a second to